It's interesting. I've given two shurim about what's happening in the Middle East. But what's interesting about all this is that something has happened which really we could have expected, which is not just a war in the Middle East. What is happening is a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism. And it's just astounding to watch. It's all over the United States, and it's in almost all the colleges, universities, academia. It's just incredible to watch. But what people are saying is that they're glad this happened to the Jews. The Jews deserve this, and so on. And this is in spite of the fact of what Hamas did to the Jews on October 7th. It's incredible. And you hear expressions which you'd never think would come from America. What is that? Gas the Jews. That's what somebody told me. That's what they're saying in UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. And I'm sure that's happening in other places. Gas the Jews? What kind of a talk is that? That's classic Holocaust Nazi speech. And that should be repeated in America? What has happened to America? Now, I went into this quite extensively in the last year. But this certainly is unexpected. Even though we expect that, after a while, the people will, they'll start turning against the Jews, ceasefire and all that other nonsense. It's just incredible how people can even say that. After the slaughter and mutilation of 1,400 Jews, and the fact that Hamas, by a ceasefire, will retain its ability to try to destroy Israel. I mean, what does it mean, a ceasefire? The whole thing is ludicrous. And Biden keeps talking about this two-state solution. Two-state solution with who? With what? There's no such thing as a partner in peace. All they want is the destruction of Jews and the end of Israel. So are they delusional? And the answer, of course they're delusional, because that's what anti-Semitism does. It makes you irrational. But in any case, we are witnessing an incredible rise in anti-Semitism. And what that has done, it has generated a tremendous amount of fear, anxiety, whatever, depression. People realize they're waking up. Wait a minute. I thought we got rid of this in 1945 after the Holocaust. You mean it's happening again? And this is exactly how things seem to happen in 1933. This is how it began, and so on, and began to grow, and so on, I'm not saying it's going to happen in America, but we are looking at something which is a historical repetition of something that happened, how many years ago was that? 75 years ago, which when you think about it, is really nothing. And we know the results of that and so on, So there's no question that many people are frightened. They don't know what to do. Especially you see that there are people, not only in America, but in England and across Europe, there's a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism. So there's a lot of fear. So because of that, it's obviously a tremendous urgent situation. How can we protect ourselves from this, you see? And that is really a very important idea that I felt should be, spoken about, that there is a way to protect ourselves. In fact, Chazal tell us, why was the first, even the first Beis HaMikdash, why was it destroyed? Chazal tell us, the rabbis tell us, because of sinas chinam. And not only to sinas chinam, it was basically because they committed the sinning of 3 sins which you are asked to give up your life if you have to transgress. But there was a great deal of sinning. But the second Beis HaMikdash, that's really when you had baseless hatred. And the Chofetz Chaim and the Maharsha say that that in itself, the baseless hatred, would not have destroyed the Second Temple. What did destroy it, they said, was the Lashon Hara that was generated as a result of the baseless hatred. This is what they say. So it may be that what sparked the tremendous Lashon Hara of that generation, it's like I say, it sparked the Lashon Hara. But what really did it was the Lashon Hara, not the sinas chinam. And this is what the Chofetz Chaim says and the Maharsha. So that in many ways is a wake-up call. But that tells us also something. The reason why the Chofetz Chaim tells us, the reason why the Moshiach does not come. Why does the exile, why is it still around after 2,000 years? Because the Jews speak Lashon Hara. And that generates a tremendous amount of baseless hatred. Why is, not of the Golas, why doesn't the Moshiach come? Why doesn't the Shekhinah, the divine presence, return? Basically, the sin is because of Lashon Hara. So therefore, the greatest protection would be to have what's called Shmir Saloshim. Now, I explained last week what the mechanics of speaking Lashon Hara, what happens in any case. So I've decided that it's worthwhile, especially because we are really in an emergency situation. It's going to get much worse before it gets better. I can tell you that now. So there has to be a way that we can avail ourselves of to protect ourselves. And not only that, if everybody does do that, right, then there's no question that the exile will end and the Beis Hamikdash will be built and the Moshiach will come. And the fourth idea is the Ribono Shel Olam will restore his presence to Klal Yisrael. So therefore, now there's something I wanted to add, which I think is very worthwhile. What are we really looking forward to initially? That is, you see. So of course we're looking forward to the end of the exile, right? The building of the Beis Hamikdash, the Moshiach, and the return of the divine presence. Those are the four things that we are really looking forward to. But these things happen in stages. So what are we therefore looking forward to? And the answer is, we are looking forward to, or we're waiting for the turnaround. This is what we're waiting for. Right now, everything is in a downhill slide. And this is part of the end, the downhill slide, and so on, which we are witnessing. We wake up in the morning and we can't believe what the world has turned into, which means America and the entire world, that the world has become an incredibly immoral and dangerous place to live, you see. So what we're looking forward to is a turnaround. What does a turnaround mean? That means the gezerah, the decree of darkness, ends. And then the Ribono Shel Olam now turns it around and he begins what's called the upward climb out of this morass, you see. That's what we're looking forward to. And as part of all this, of course, is the end of the exile, Mashiach and so on. But the question is, when does it happen? When does the turnaround begin? You see, because there's an unusual feature of the turnaround. Once it turns around, because of what's called Be'itoi, that the Mashiach can come either in its designated time, and there is a time that Mashiach must come. It's guaranteed. There's no longer, Klal Yisrael does not have to do anything more to bring the Mashiach. It's called the end of time, you see. So the question is, when does that happen? Now, what's interesting is that once that happens, once the end time has happened, and the gezerah, the decree of the darkness before the end is terminated, then that turnaround means that it is irreversible. It cannot go back, even if the Jews sin. And it's not only that, but it's unstoppable. It cannot stop. It must move forward. That's really what we're waiting for, believe it or not. We want the end of the decree of the end. We want Be'itoi. We want it to end now, which, like I said, it cannot stop and it cannot reverse. It's over. I want to bring this out before I get on with the shir. What is important to know is this, is that if this war, and I mentioned last year, that this war that is happening now that it is global, no longer between Israel and Hamas, it's really good and evil. It's really the Jews versus the anti-Semitism of the entire world, because the entire world seems to be condemning the Jews. That's Gog and Magog. And I mentioned last week that it's very possible that this war is now at least the major part of Gog and Magog. But I want to tell you something. Gog and Magog is the end. That's what it is. Which will mean that since this war has started, it's a game changer. And that means that we are now in the midst of the turnaround. That's the good news. That if this war is part of Gog and Magog, which it seems to be, then that means that we are now witnessing the turnaround. We have arrived at Be'itoi, which is incredible news, you see. And the Medrash supports this view, because it says in the Medrash, which I brought 2 shurim ago, that Iran at the end of time, B'achros hayomim, in fact it says that in the 7-year period, in the week that Moshiach comes, okay, what will happen, you see? So it says that Iran will make war, Persia, against the entire world, incite a war against Arabia. And Arabia will go consult Edom. Edom, of course, is Esav, which I have mentioned many times, America and Europe and so on. And then all of a sudden they will begin to destroy the world. And we know that's very possible with nuclear weapons, right? And then Israel will be frightened. And I mentioned that, what that means and so on. But then it says that a baskol comes out and says, don't be frightened. This is God speaking, right? A baskol is a divine voice. Don't be frightened, because all that I have done, or that is happening now, is because I have done for your sake, which is the end. And I had gone through that in the last year and the one before that, part 1 and part 2 of the Middle East conflict. What does that mean? That means God is saying this is the final war. Well, what is the final war? And the answer is Gog and Magog, right? So it sounds, therefore, based on that medrash, it's Yalkut Shemaini, based on that this war, which is a war against Persia, Iran, and we know Iran is the major source of the entire war of Hezbollah and Hamas. I mean, Iran is the major character and so on, right? And the Medrash says that God says, this is it. So it's very likely that we are in the middle of that war, which is Gog and Magog. But the incredible news of that is that we have just witnessed the turnaround, because Gog and Magog is the end, and there is nothing after Gog and Magog, you see. So if that's the case, like I said, we have now witnessed the turnaround, which means that we are now going to witness, based on these ideas, we are going to witness tremendous amount of victories and tremendous hatzlocha, success, from here on in, you see, which is a news beyond what we can even begin to imagine and so on, you know. And remember what I said a long time ago, that according to the Zohar, Tchias HaMesim, which is resurrection of the dead, will occur 210 years before the end of time, or the end of Olam Hazeh, this world. And since the world will go till 6,000, the year 6,000, right, which is the English year 2240, 210 years before that, there will be resurrection of the dead, because resurrection of the dead, which is Tchias HaMesim, begins right after Moshiach ben David appears. 210 years before 2240 is what? Is 2030, right? 2030, that's the, if you think about that, that's absolutely incredible. That's only what? We're now in 2023 and 2030, so what are we looking at here, you know? We're looking at less than 7 years, and which would make sense. And that's when the Zohar says that the Tchias HaMesim, which means automatically Sheikh ben David. And that is why we are seeing a tremendous acceleration of these events. And it's very likely, like I said, let's hope it's true, that this is the final war of Gog and Magog, and therefore we will witness tremendous amount of salvations and redemptions from here on in. So this is a very important idea. But in order to do that, I mentioned also, we have to make sure it's be'itoi. And how do we do that? By doing exactly what they did in Egypt. And like I said, it says in the Medrash 3 times, 3 different places. The only reason why Jews were redeemed from Egypt is because they did not speak Lashon Hara. And I explained the whole mechanics of that. You see, that not speaking Lashon Hara will actually bring the end of time. So I'm hoping that everybody takes on to learn 2 halachos a day, and there's an entire, program for this. The Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation, has that program to learn 2 halachos a day, you see. And everybody considers that to do that and takes on the tremendous mitzvah of Shmiras HaLashon. Therefore, as such, because we are living in such an incredibly urgent time, so you will know why guarding against speaking Lashon Hara is so powerful. And my hope, of course, is that people will hear the shir and commit to learn the 2 halachos, and certainly to observe and try to get everybody not to speak Lashon Hara.